Welcome, Angie.
Thank you for having me.
Well, thank you for being here. And I thought I would just start off by sort of introducing you and saying who you are. Angie, I know Angie because back in the day in 2001, I worked for Vector Canada as a sales rep. For those of you who don't know Vector, they sell Cutco knives. And Angie was running the Calgary office at the time. Now she's the national sales manager, right? For
Yep.
all of Vector Canada.
Yep.
And she also has this business, Front Row Moms, with a partner, Megan. And here she is. So tell us, Angie, a little bit about, you know, what brought you to where you are today with Front Row Moms.
Well, that's
Huge question.
it's yeah, okay. The short version, the long version. Well, I would say that is a long time coming, but a byproduct of I feel like the business that I've been in and the opportunities that have been provided for me and how I have continued to search for a community of like-hearted people that want very similar things from life that can help me support and grow. And so I think that, the business that I'm in direct sales, starting out as a sales rep was really based on this idea that, anything is possible when you put your mind to it and you put the work in, you can create really what you want. And so really having that foundation as someone in university and a young person coming through, growing up, I continued to lean into that of having no limits and knowing the ceiling. There was no ceiling, and I could just continue to go and go and go. And so I did that as a sales rep, and then moved into management. And what ended up happening is just about between, I don't know, 23, 24 years ago now, before I had children, my husband and I had been married for a few years, and we started talking about what next steps and having a family. And at that time, there was nobody else in the company that I was working with and who I still work for that had done that. There was no other woman that was at an executive leadership position. I was contracted, so I was running my own business, but contracted by that company, by Vector and Cutco. And but there was no other woman that had chosen to uh, figure out how to run the business at a high level and have kids and ideally stay married. And
Right.
so I didn't, yeah, so I said I didn't have there was no example. And the saying, you've probably heard the saying of it's hard to be what you can't see. And so I wanted that. And I remember going to a personal growth seminar with Robin Sharma. We did an exercise at the end, and the exercise was about our biggest fears. And I remember I remember actually not wanting to do the exercise because deep down, I thought the answer was going to reveal itself as saying, you just need to quit the job and just have kids. Because I really wanted to have kids. And everything leading up to my life at that point was very set a goal, create a plan, hit the goal. That's kind of what had happened. And so I was like, but I didn't know how this was going to work, financially, running a business, not knowing how to step away at that time and create the right things in order to do that. And so we did the exercise, and it basically came out with like, do it anyway, like try. So the leadership that I was working with at the time were great, and really wanted to support me, even though they didn't know exactly how this was going to go. But they said, hey, we'll do what we can. We're not in your situation. And so my husband and I decided, hey, let's try this. And so um, we, fast forward 5 years later, now have two kids, and they're 3 years apart. And my husband decided to stay home for a few years. And as we started continuing to build this life and this family, my expectations of myself were always that it wasn't going to be a excuse or a reason why the business didn't do well because I had a family. I'd seen, different people, not so much other women in the business, but I'd seen people in other areas continue to do that. And it was just important to me that I really loved what I was doing. I didn't want to stop what I was doing, but I also knew I wanted to be a present parent too. And so I continued to keep looking to seek out communities and people that I felt could relate. And I remember having a conversation with somebody that said, we got a nanny. And I was like, that was kind of foreign to me to even be thinking about that. I just didn't even, I didn't even think that was something. I think I felt guilty. Well, I should be the one raising my kid. I just felt, we met a neighbor who had a live-in nanny, and that really allowed my husband to go back to work. And that made a big impact. For about 5 years, we had someone living at home, and then kids got old enough that that wasn't necessarily, we didn't need that anymore, and continued to have my not only big goals with work, but also personally. I had some fitness goals I wanted to pursue. And obviously, we've been married a lot longer now. So we started attending more seminars and figuring that part of life out. And I kept running into this thing where I couldn't get into conversation with people that got it, that ran their own, like financially ran their own business. So that's a dynamic,
Mhm.
were earning the majority of the income in their family for one part, had kids, and wanted basically it all, like it sounds selfish to say that, but kind of wanted it all.
Right.
And I ended up joining, I eventually in like 2018, 19, joined a women's group. And I felt like, oh man, so much of what I was looking for was there. Women that normalize success, and they normalize talking about income and challenges and all these things, except for when I'd get into conversation with someone who didn't have children, I just felt it just was different. And it ended up being the thing that became more and more important to me was this window of time is short, and I was felt it slipping. And so I really wanted to get into community with women that had these big goals, were ambitious, but they wanted to be present parents. And they also really ideally wanted, they wanted to stay married. And that doesn't mean that that's was the answer for that is not the answer for everybody, but whether it was married there or was getting into a relationship that, they really felt this deep connection with. And so I ended up revisiting a conversation with a good friend of mine who I'd known for over 25 years, a past colleague of mine, John Vroman, who had started a organization for men called Front Row Dads. And my husband joined that group, and their focus was really to put family over business, instead of the other way around, which can happen. And so I decided that I was gonna, I said, I really what like so much of that group I was with, but I wanted the common connector to be moms. And so I contacted John, and we continued a conversation. And eventually, what it turned into was a Facebook group of conversation that led to some virtual events. And then I met in COVID my now partner, Megan Corey, and I told her what I was building and what I wanted. And she was, feeling very similar, same position, and said, I'll help you build it. And then that led to 2024, where we had our first retreat here in Vernon. And then in December of last year, launched an official membership, and then had our second retreat in April of last year in Scottsdale, and continuing to build a membership of women that, when someone says to me, they say, really, what is Front Row Moms? And I say, well, it's really a community, I think, for moms who want more, that want more connection, more fulfillment, more real talk, where career-driven women meet authenticity, friendship, and a deeper version of success. And
Mhm.
maybe now I think redefine really what does success mean. I think that there's a lot of versions of that out there, and we want to create a space where women can create their own version. And we do it by prioritizing health, family, and personal fulfillment. That's the focus, but we
Yeah.
all have these things we're excited about. So
Oh, I love that. No, that's amazing. And do you find that in that focus of putting sort of family, self, health first, that naturally business and the goals that women want to achieve start to manifest or come forward, et cetera,
yeah,
by doing that?
I think because when the community of women we are attracting and getting in conversation with are they have those two things in common, where they're moms, but they have this professional desire to make an impact in the world.
Yeah.
So they have this thing where they're like that, and it's hard to define what that is. That might be a business, it might be an executive at an organization, and they feel so passionate about the work that they're doing in the world. And they also know, I mean, I came to this feeling not too long ago, but I remember thinking about, my kids are not going to be home forever.
Yeah.
They're just not. Yeah, ideally, they're not. And so, when that comes, that's sometimes when some women do pivot at that time, sometimes. But I really wanted to continue to build something that could evolve with me. And I knew that I wanted to continue to have something that I felt excited about. And I felt I was making a really positive impact in the world. And so, health and personal fulfillment and family, when those things are good, it's almost like everything else is good, even if it's not. And what I mean by that is like, I could have a bad day at work, but if my relationship with my partner is good and I'm feeling good, like in my body, and my relationship with my kids is good, I can handle whatever happens with work.
Right.
But if things aren't good at home or my health isn't good, my relationships aren't good, work could be amazing, but it's not enough.
Yeah, no, for sure. Like it's not, it's like an external thing fulfilling you versus that connection, that relationship. Oh, and I
Yeah.
love that you wanted to create this relationship with your family and your kids. I know my kids are a bit younger. My daughter's 12, and I keep thinking about how, she's in almost in that teenager year. I can feel that surliness or that teenage anger coming up. And I keep thinking to myself, yeah, there's all these stressors in the world that are always going to exist. Jobs will change. Things will go up and down in my business and entrepreneurship. But what I really want is to be able to, in 10 years, be able to have the kind of conversations that say, you're having with your kids, or like my daughter come home from college and want to spend time with her family, right? That to me, and I didn't really necessarily want to do that as a kid when I was around my parents. So I want to create that to be like, yeah, I can be a hardworking mom. I can have a business. And though my family matters to me, like my connection with my kids matters. And I think that's such an important thing. And we're told so often as women, especially quote unquote ambitious women who have like goals for businesses, etc., that you have to choose one or the other, right? It's like you can have the business or you can have the family and you can't have both. But you're saying you can have both. Here's how you can try to navigate it by being in community with other people who have both and what they do and bounce ideas and
Yeah.
all
Yeah.
of it.
And I think it's a great when you're around women of different
Hmm.
stages of their professional endeavors, stages of their kids, stages of their marriage. I think there's so much wisdom within us that we don't even know that we have unless we're given a space to offer, or we're asked the questions and we're given the opportunity to connect in conversation. I've learned so many things from women older than me that they've shared with me that I know for a fact that impacted how things I've done with my kids. And so I really feel strong about it's not everybody at the same spot because there's different stages in our life. And I remember just even my sister-in-law at one point when my kids were really little, right? And she was like, I was getting uptight about them not eating their vegetables, right? And she's like, Angie, this is like a little kid problem and it's actually not that big of a deal. And I was like, it's a really big deal. It's a really big deal.
Yeah.
She's like, it's actually really not. You might want to just like let this one go. And I still hear her voice where she's like, and she had kids older than me, right? So she had been
Yeah.
on the path a little bit more. And it didn't mean that I necessarily had to, I was going to do everything somebody who's been down there before told me. But it was this great little bit of like permission and advice from somebody who'd been down the path to go, hey, when I reflect, this is kind of the wisdom I can share. And so a community that is based on women that learn from, with, and to each other, I think is really helpful. And so some of the women in the community have really little kids. Some of them have kids that are like your age, where they're like your kids, just about a teenager, or 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. And then there's women like me that my son's in grade 12 and my daughter's in second year university, right? So, or they've
Yeah.
fled the home. But I think that I feel like so much of what I do, I know that if I don't create, here's an example. My fitness goals tend to be more on point if I have something I'm working towards. This is just me. So I'll sign up for an event or do something with friends that's coming up. And if I've got that on the calendar, it gives purpose and meaning to the things that I'm doing today. Right. And I felt the same way about this community, that if parenting is really important to me, my health is really important to me, my relationships, well, who am I talking to about that? This actually formed a little bit of this internal community of accountability, which is positive accountability. It's I'm choosing it, I'm asking for it. And so I'm putting myself in the room with other women that are thinking about very similar things and want the most out of those areas. And so it brought those, for me, it's always been so easy to like, oh, I can talk about like leadership and business, and I can talk about that to like, I'm constantly, oh yeah, I'll take that on. I'll read that book. I'll get that book. I'll do this.
Right.
But I think that this community definitely puts the focus on these, we call it the women, the family, the impact, and we have 6 pillars that the community is based on. And in
Mhm.
the woman, it is emotional intelligence and vibrant health. Under the family, it's purposeful parenting and thriving relationships. And under the impact, it's business evolution and financial empowerment. And we've structured that so that our retreats and our virtual events and our conversations and our pod calls weave those topics in to keep them at the forefront.
I love that. Yeah, and when you say purposeful parenting, it's so true that we put so much into like learning how to be business people, learning how to develop skills that way. And we're not, when it comes to parenting, ever really taught anything. We're just given this baby, we take this baby home, and then we like are told raise it, right? And I think it was actually a John Vroman reel I saw the other day where he said, these are the 3 questions dads should be asking their kids, right? And I thought, I've never asked a question like that to my kid. Like, are you feeling seen and heard from me? What can I do to make you feel more seen and heard? And just these questions that I would ask anybody I'm working with, right? If I'm having a problem at work, I'm able to say, hey, this relationship is, sticky, or something isn't working, or I'm feeling like we're not meeting, or we're speaking a different language, whatever it is. But
Mhm.
it's interesting that I've never, well, sometimes I have, but for the most part, it's like surviving parenthood, right? Versus purposely and intentionally managing, like that feels like the wrong word, but you know, investing in the relationship,
Yeah.
in what you want it to be, as you would with a romantic relationship or any relationship, right? A
Yeah.
friendship. And it's
Yeah.
just so rare to ask our kids those questions. And I love that within your community, people are encouraged to ask those type of questions to their kids. Because if you have a goal of the relationship you want to create with your kid, you have to, I guess, be asking these questions to make
Yeah.
sure that you're on track to doing that.
Totally. And I think, and I think that, when kids are really young and we're working parents and we're doing all these things, the idea of like, oh, I'm going to take some space out to like think about, like, for me anyway, it was like, oh, I don't have time for that, right? But there does become a time when there is a bit more space, and we do feel a bit more confident on, oh, okay. Like, like you have the first kid and you're like, can I do this?
Yeah.
And then you get a second kid, you're like, oh, I did that one. So this one's okay. So I think I can, like you're like, I'm not perfect, but I think I got it. So you're at least your bandwidth is a little bit more open. But like I think about this and I go, I really don't think that my parents, there wasn't, for one, there's no internet. Okay, there's no one sharing a reel here going, hey, have you thought about this? Like, and I don't think that was part of the conversation they were having. And that's just because it wasn't. But I think it becomes, that saying of when you know better, you do better.
Mhm.
It's not, they did the best they could with all the tools and resources they had. And I'm here today and I'm so grateful for my parents. And now we have these other resources that if we start asking, like you're saying, these questions of like, how do I become more intentional and purposeful? And if my end goal is to create this relationship, what type of conversation should we be having? Well, we can only really learn from people that have been in the space. And if we don't find that space or start asking those questions, we're going to end up in the default of just whatever comes at us, we get. And we just say, well, you know, and put our hands up.
Yeah, 100%. And it's almost like going back to the ancient way of women learning from other women, right? I
Mm,
mean, I love that you say that there's different people in all stages. And I actually often think about something that you shared with me that somebody had shared with you about at the end of the night, our kids, especially at my kids' age, they want to talk about their life and tell me all the stories of their life at bedtime.
Yep.
And it's the time of day where I'm just like, okay, I'm ready to do my own thing. I want you to go to bed, right? And you had shared that a woman had told you when your kids were at that stage, always stay because that's when that connection comes. And so there was one night not long ago, and I wanted to leave so badly. And Evie just started talking, and I just had to say to myself, you have to stay, listen and stay. And it ended up being such a great conversation. And I was just grateful to have learned that knowledge. And I imagine that's the kind of knowledge that's shared in the community, right? Yeah.
100%. Yes, 100%. Like I even sometimes like that little bit of wisdom, that man, I just think about how many moments that gave me with my kids when they were little or when
Mhm.
and then, because before you know it, I remember her saying to me, before you know it, you're not going to be the person they're going to talk to. Like now, ideally, there's stages of that, and then they do talk to you. But this little time when you're so tired and you're like, I just want them to go to sleep. And then all of a sudden they just open and you're like, yes, exactly what you said. You fight the urge and you just stay. And that tip she gave me really, really, I think it had a huge impact in the relationship with my kids. And I
Yeah.
think that yeah, there's even the idea of like I remember at the last retreat sharing something with the women and just the look on another woman's face to go, "Oh, I'm not alone."
Yeah.
Just like, things that you think no one else is going through or you think no one else has thought about or you think that just must be my kids or that just must be me or that must be, and then all of a sudden you hear someone share a story and you go, "Oh, wow, like I felt like that. Like I've been
Mhm.
in that. Oh, you did that." Like there's just this it's you're not, this isn't tip not all these things are unique to you. And if you can hear a perspective or even the fact that you can just share without needing any advice in return, because we have found, if you think about it, especially if you've got a profession or a business and then you're raising your kids, you very rarely, as the mother, are the one that is heard. They're all coming to you, right? So you are creating the space for them to talk and this to talk. And then at work, it's happening. And so at the retreat, one of the most, I think, valuable things that we do is we allow women a space to speak. And they don't necessarily even need the coaching or the response. They just need to be listened to.
Yeah, to be seen and heard and listened to, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's powerful for sure. And then, I mean, okay, so at the forefront, one of the things you said with Front Row Moms is like, I'm really trying not to say like anyway, was that it's to create this community where, you put family and health first and then also relationships. So tell me, I mean, women, I find self-abandon a lot in motherhood, it seems. And I love that this is offering a space for people to maybe take some of that back to say, like, when am I overextending myself? And what have I done where I've put in, like you're just saying, all the energy and space to listening to everybody else, to taking on holding space for everyone's emotions and not holding it for theirs. So, do you find that that's a theme that has come up that women have in their jobs and in their parenting have really sort of taken on a lot and in the process sort of forgotten what drives them, what makes them happy, taking space for
Mhm.
themselves?
Yeah. Yeah. I think that happens without us even realizing.
Yeah.
Yeah, and some of it stems from how we were raised as kids and what we saw our parents' role was. And I've seen it manifest or come out in different ways. I've seen it where women that when they grew up, their mom stayed home. And so
Mhm.
their mom, made the lunches, was always home when they got home from school, was the mom that, or the dad, but tip back, 20 years, 25, 30 years, 40 years ago, it was quite often where it was the mom. And they never missed a game or a sporting event or, so when they are now choosing to do both, they can feel quite guilty for that. and they
Mhm.
compare themselves to what they think it should be. And so then they end up trying to do both, but they feel bad about it. And so then they abandon anything else outside of parenting or work. The idea that they would take a vacation by themselves, the idea that they would pursue something personally, the idea of those things would just be like it doesn't fit. So when
Mhm.
it comes to, whether we want to call that self-care or time away or, it 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 creates this dissonance, it's really hard for somebody to wrap their head around. And then when they get around some other women that they're like, oh, you know, they have found a way to continue to do these things. It doesn't mean that there's not compromise because I think anything in life has compromise. And because it's funny, people are like, well, if you do that, then you're not doing that. I'm like, you're right. But there's actually gifts in both. You know,
Mhm.
I remember when I would go away for work trips, when I came back, my kids were so like they missed me.
Mhm.
And I
Yeah.
and I was like, "Oh," and there's been some gifts and independence that they've created because, I am not preparing all the things all of the time, and neither is my husband, right? So, I think that one of the exercises that we did, at a Tony Robbins event was around the, like, who would you blame for things that have not gone well in your life, if you were to blame somebody, right? And we went through this exercise. And then Tony turned around and said, "So who have you become because of that?" And then
Right.
make the list and you're like, "Oh, I've become blank, blank, blank." These are all these positive attributes. And then he says, "Well, if you're going to blame them for the bad stuff, you got to blame them for the good stuff. It's called blaming effectively."
Right.
you know? And so it really, I think that when there are women definitely that feel it's hard to like attend a retreat because they're leaving their family for 3 days. So they're like, "Oh, I'm already got work and I got this and I got that. How can I do that?" But then when they do it, they have even more joy that they come back to their family with because they were given this space to reconnect to themselves. They put themselves first. And as we've all heard the saying,
Yeah.
you can't pour from an empty cup. And so if
Right.
you don't know what fills you up and you just keep thinking that it's about everybody else, it's never about you, right? We're never really giving through true abundance because we're feeling a little bit like we don't feel full. And so,
Totally.
yeah.
No, 100%. And I think that it's so, again, it comes back to that expectation that we almost have. Maybe it's society, maybe it's like you're saying the framework of what our, like back in the day when a mom would typically stay home and wasn't working outside the household. And it's like the expectation that we have to or should be doing all of it, right? And I
Mhm.
remember for me, I remember feeling so like I had to stay home and stay with my kids. So I remember at first staying home and then I wasn't making enough money. So then I thought, oh, I'll run a daycare and still get to be around my kids. And finally, I remember thinking to myself, this isn't making me happy. And it was almost admitting that I felt that shame around not actually wanting to be around my kids 24/7 and recognizing that actually it was a better parent for me. And I'm not saying it's everybody's decision. I mean, whatever makes you
Yeah.
happy. But for me, I remember when I went back to work and I dropped off Evie at daycare 3 days a week, I remember never feeling as happy and as happy as a parent as for 3 years I hadn't felt like that, right? And I remember thinking, oh, that's because I'm doing something for me. I'm doing something that I want to do. I'm feeling ambitious, I'm feeling goal oriented, and just having that back just created a whole new blueprint for me of what I wanted to do. And I was fighting constantly against that shame I had myself about, oh, but I should be going to every single activity. I should be doing this. Even now, that comes up if I want to go on a work trip or I have something going on and there's a kid hockey game or soccer game, right? It's like that past idea that, oh, we should be at every single game, and that shows that you care. Well, you can be there in spirit. You can call your kid before, you can call your kid after, you can show up to X amount of games, and it can still be a committed parent who came to the events. So
Yeah.
just so wild the expectations we put on ourselves.
Yep. Yeah. It doesn't have to look like the neighbor.
No.
It just doesn't have to. And I think that just, we just need to keep asking the question, how do we want this to be? because
Yeah.
if, like there was, yeah, like when we got a live-in nanny, I remember that, yeah, I was like, oh no, you know, what are not just what are people going to think? I was like, oh, what if my kids start calling I was like, oh my gosh. And it actually just, it made me think part time is that, you can also spend a lot of time with someone, but not spend any time with them.
Yes.
Like you can be in the house with people, but that doesn't mean that you're actually, really spending time. Now, all, like you just said, I think some people are like that is their joy and their gift. It is to be home and it is to be that in that position and they have the ability to do it. Financially they can do it. They want to do it. Awesome. But I also think it's okay if that doesn't fit for somebody and it doesn't mean that there's lots of ways to create an intentional relationship. The first time I heard about the family board meeting, that
Yeah.
really was a big deal for me. Like I actually was like, I remember hearing about it. Someone said, oh yeah, you every 3 months you spend 4 hours with one child, one parent, one child. They get to design the agenda. You could take some pictures, but typically there's no technology. Maybe you share a meal, but you do something and they design the day, the 4 hours. I remember thinking initially, I was like, oh, how could you every 3 months? I was like, that's like a no brainer. Like, how do you not find 4 hours to be one on one with your kid and da 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 da? Then you get into school and you get into activities and you get into things. And then you're like, oh my goodness, this actually isn't that easy, especially if you have lots of kids, right? So then it's like, but when we started doing that, and when Declan, I remember, was really young when we started, I think he was probably 5 or 6 when we started it, just him lighting up over telling me we're playing tag,
Right.
we're doing this, we're playing hide and seek, which he loved. I
Aw,
don't really love hide and seek, but he loved it.
me
We
neither.
would build stuff, we'd go to the science, he was like, this is amazing. And
That's cool.
that was something we looked forward to. And that didn't mean we didn't spend time together outside of that. But those were little things that was something we started to do because our lives were busy. We had a lot going on. And
Yeah.
I also think with anything, you can always go a little too far this way and then you come back. But you don't know sometimes, like you've kind of evolve. And it's even like with, I think, relationships, like,
Yeah.
with, I think, anybody who's been married a while knows that doesn't just evolve into greatness,
Right. It doesn't just evolve into greatness. A good quote. Yeah, it's so true. Yes.
you know?
Yeah.
And then when you work, well, especially for me, not, that's the wrong word, not to say especially, but in my experience, I was surrounded and still am by a lot of men. And I
Mhm.
think the way that I developed as a leader became more masculine.
Mhm.
I leaned on a lot of the masculine qualities in order to get things done and create things and get respect, or maybe and have a presence. And I really leaned into that. I really didn't, I, I, I would say when I look back, I didn't lean into the feminine side of me, which is being more receptive and receiving. And, it was much more the masculine. And then by accident, unconsciously, that would translate to home,
Right, of
and
course.
opposites attract. So you end up, as someone said to me, emasculating. You can emasculate your partner,
Mhm.
and that's not a that's not a good recipe, because we're not being authentic to who we are deep down.
Yeah.
And and my husband and I still do a lot of work with that. I do a lot of work with that because I know that there's a default I have that's natural. And when I say natural, I mean like, yes,
Right.
internally I think I'm feminine naturally, but I
Yeah.
I've wired myself to
Yeah.
lean on that, and that's not helpful for
Right.
intimacy.
Yeah. And so how do you think that I just always find that so fascinating, the topic of like emasculation and all of it. And I had never, I think I shared this with you, that I had never really thought about that until maybe last April or something, where I was dating this guy and he was talking about emasculation of men. And so I got him to send me this podcast and I deep dove that podcast. And then I actually had to call and text my ex-husband and say, "Hey, I emasculated you in our marriage and I'm so sorry." And he kind of is used to me saying wild things and I thought he would never answer me and he actually said, "Thank you for saying that. I really appreciate you saying that to me." And I did feel emasculated. And I think it for him, like that conversation eternally shifted something in our dynamic. Even now, I think it plays into it because I realized where I had been cutting him down or putting expectations that he should be doing this and should be doing this and getting him like in that very masculine or like feminine, when the wounded feminine or whatever they say does manifest or show up in that need for control, right? Or like you need to take out the garbage this time at this time because this is what I want, without looking at the bigger picture and saying, okay, well, does this really matter? Will it get done? Right? So those type of things. And how did you, when you found yourself in that maybe dynamic where you were leaning into some of those masculine traits, how did you get out of that? Like, how did
Mm.
you come back to being in your marriage and more of that receptive feminine energy?
Well, let's just say that's a work in progress.
Okay,
So
yeah.
let's start with that.
Yeah.
Be very inauthentic for me to say, "Oh yeah, I did this and it's all good." I would say it's a work in progress, but I would say that some of the things, it's interesting. Before I was even told this was a thing, kind of going back to like Tony Robbins' Date with Destiny,
Hmm.
there was a full day on this on masculine and feminine energy, and he put it very clear of the whole idea of, yeah, who are you attracted to when you first met your partner?
Hmm.
And I thought about that, right? Are those same things, are they still attracted to that, or do they annoy you? And I was like, oh my gosh, why do those things annoy me now? I'm like, what is happening? And then talked about having kids. And he said, when you do what you model in front of your children. And, at that moment, I was like, oh my gosh, I'm like doing everything wrong. Like, I remember, I'd get picked up from the airport from a work trip and I would run to my kids. Oh, hi, Warren. I'd run to my kids.
Right.
And I remember him being like, you're showing your kids that they matter more than your partner. And it really is not that way at all, because, ideally this relationship is the strongest part of everything. And then your kids are second, right? And so then it became at least it was an awareness. So I started to shift that a bit. And then I think that I didn't realize how much I appreciated when he would make decisions, but so many times I just wouldn't let him.
Mm.
And it's crazy because I would think about like when I'm not at work and I would say, oh, I have decision fatigue. You make the decision. I've made too many decisions. But in reality, it was probably more of my feminine wanting to be taken care of
Right.
and wanting the support and asking, without saying the words, but yes, saying, hey, I'm not like, I think I'd been conditioned in different things of like, I can take care of myself. I'm fine.
Yeah.
I got this. And yes, I can, but I don't want to. I do
Right.
want someone to do those things, and I want to feel like I do want someone to take care of and step into that role, and us to go through this in partnership. And so, um,
Yeah.
yeah, sometimes it was even pausing when I came home from work, is just actually sitting in my car for a minute before walking into the house to go, okay, like what energy do I want to bring? Like I need to leave this one and bring this. And then eventually I was like, man, I should lean on more of that in my work,
Right.
because that just wasn't a thing, like just it wasn't talked about like leaning into your feminine strengths and femininity in work. It just, for me, at least 15 years ago, that wasn't something people were talking about. But now I think it is more so talked about of,
Yeah.
yes, there's so much strength in that femininity of receiving, and accepting, and like just then that push.
Right.
What if we could create more space? And yeah. So I think that it, for me, there's lots of little things. It's pausing, it's thinking about it, it's letting go, not having so much control,
Hmm.
learning to listen.
I like that. Yeah. And I mean, I think it is just when we're in these positions where you're in a leadership role, where we've been, like you were saying at the beginning of this call, conditioned to lead in a certain way, right? Then we fall into the pattern or the strategy of what we know.
Yeah.
And it's hard to break. I mean, there's this amazing guy on the pack. I'm like the pack president this year. So there's this guy in the pack who's taken on making these posters that he puts in the kids' pochettes. So that aside, he's great. And he sent an email not long ago, and part of me wanted to like jump in what my blueprint of leadership is and be like, great, so we need to do this, we need to do this, we need to do that. But before sending it, I did sort of exactly what you're saying. I took a minute, I paused, and I thought, what's the energy, Alex, that you want to show up in? And I was like, okay, Josh has got this. He's clearly taken leadership on this and is doing an awesome job. So I was like, great, whatever you think, Josh. And he was like, okay, this is what we need to do. Boom, 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 boom. And it relieved a thing off my brain. He's doing it. He does it a great job, far better than I ever would, because I do not want to sit there making a Canva thing. I'm not good at that. And I don't need to lead in that way that I thought or have been trained or blueprinted to lead in that masculine energy. It can be, okay, great. What can you do? Oh, amazing.
Yeah.
Like, and it's just so, I find it more rewarding in the sense that I'm less in my head, less trying to prove in that proving energy and, oh, I have to be the leader, so I have to do it this way. And it's just easier. And I want things to be easier,
Yeah.
I think.
Ease. A friend of mine has had a friend of hers give her a painting, and the painting just says ease.
Mm,
It's
I
like,
love that.
oh, how can we have more ease
Yeah.
in our life? And I honestly think you don't even know what that means unless you've been in what we call dis-ease, right?
Yeah.
So it's this interesting dynamic of like, well, what is that? Well, you don't even know until you've kind of, and I'm not saying you have to go so far that you're like it's irreversible, but you kind of are aware when you're out of ease. And then when we are thinking, what does that feel like to be in ease? And how can we be more supportive and be in an energy of how can I help versus
Mhm.
let me just tell you what to do. I mean, one of my challenges is just speaking so fast because I'm so excited to share.
Mine too.
And I it can and it can definitely come across as not listening, just trying to get your own voice heard, all these things. And I think that there, if we want to talk about strength and power, that actually creates more strength and power when we give people the space to speak,
Hmm.
seen and heard.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just that. Well, somebody that I was in coaching with, she told me, Alex, sometimes come across like this because you're just like primed and ready to go. And I want you to practice just creating spaciousness, slow down. Take the biggest breath you've ever taken in your life and just pause. Because I think that is my go-to strategy as well. It's just I get excited. I'm ready to spit out all the words, but it does come across as a little in people's faces at time. And also, like, what is she doing? I can't keep up with her, right? So,
Yeah.
yeah, it's all just a learning
Yeah.
experience for sure.
It is.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think it's helpful again to go back to are you inviting in people to give you that feedback? And,
Mhm.
sometimes it's not fun to hear it. Um, but can you create spaces where you do invite it in and say, hey, let me know. And
Mhm.
it doesn't mean that like you can't be you because you want to be you, but I think it's important, right, for people to be able to share and people at least that you trust to say, yeah, just like that. Because there's a way to give great feedback where you go, oh, thank you.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Great. And nobody told me that before her. I
Right.
mean, I'm 42. Wouldn't have been great to hear it before. So it's perfect. But yeah, and it's interesting because you did say in that Tony Robbins retreat, right? I mean, you said that thing about who did you become based on these strategies? And some of that is exactly that, right? I mean, who did I become by being somebody who had to make sure my voice was heard or right? We all have these strategies we fall back on. So,
Totally. And like we said, it's people that supported us as we developed, did the best they could with the tools they had,
Hmm.
which is amazing. And now, if we want to change that for our kids and for our environment, we need to continue to be that work in progress, that nobody's perfect, but we're looking for ways and tools and communities and resources to help us be better, be our best versions, so that we can help everybody else do the same.
I love that. Okay, so tell me before we wrap it up, what is happening in my favorite city, Austin, for your upcoming retreat?
Okay. Sounds good. So this will be our third retreat that we have coming up, and it is in Austin, Texas, November 4th to the 6th. And when I think about our retreats, well, um, there, I mean, I don't know what someone else's version of a retreat is, but it's definitely engaging, it's interactive, it is connection, it creates a space for you to reflect. We have very intentional questions that we will give people to get into conversation with in small groups or in pairs. And throughout the event, starts on Tuesday evening, and then it goes Wednesday and Thursday till about 3. We have three wonderful women that are going to be speaking and facilitating at different points throughout the event. And the women, when I think about the women that we are getting in the room, it is just so special because it's hard to get in front of these women, let alone this intimate space where they're going to share. So we have Jenna Phillips Ballard, who's going to be on part of our first session. When we think of her, we think abundance of all types and helping people to manifest that abundance. And then we have Sarah Entrup and we have Melissa Davison. And these two women, when we talk about what we were just chatting about, from masculine and masculine, feminine strengths and where we come from and how that polarity works and how do we lean more into who we are as a woman, in order for that to be something that empowers more of the relationship with ourselves and with our partner. uh, there's going to be some really great, I mean, if you look these women up, I said to some women, I said, oh, well, it might scare some women away when they go check out these women because they're like, oh, what am I getting into? Said, but we all know that when we can create a better relationship with our bodies and who we are and love ourselves, we can offer that love in such a bigger way to a partner that we have. So these two women will lead different exercises, and there's just some really cool things that they're going to bring to the retreat. And then I think that when I think about the retreat, it's hard to describe, like for me to write it out, but like
Mhm.
I had said earlier, the wisdom really is in the room. Women just have to be given the right space and environment for that to come out. And so, from something called wisdom circles that we do, to debriefs before and after these facilitation and these speakers, to breath work and yoga that we'll do, all based in one of the coolest cities I've ever been to, which is Austin, Texas. From
Best.
just the vibe in Austin, the good food, the music. The title of the retreat is Rhythm and Rise. It's an opportunity. And I think about the difference between an escape and a retreat. An escape is rarely planned, it happens in haste. And it's usually with habits we're not super proud of. Maybe
Right?
scrolling, maybe drinking, maybe eating too much, maybe, I don't know, leaving the situation. But a retreat, is the opposite. It's planned, it's thought about, and it's designed to create a space where when somebody goes to a retreat, they're thinking about how's it going to benefit me and the people that I love.
Mhm.
This is a space that I'm going to intentionally go to so that when I come back from it, there's even more of me to be able to give to my work and my family and the people that I love. So, the feedback we get from people that come are, I didn't know how much I needed it until I came, and that's
That
such a gift.
that
So,
is a gift.
yeah,
Oh, that's beautiful.
yes.
Oh, I love it. I'm going to put the link at the bottom after when we
Awesome.
post this so people can sign up. And yeah, I guess to wrap it up, what would you say? I have two quick questions for you. What would you say advice you'd give your younger, either business or mom self? And what do you think advice like your future self would give you right now?
Mm. Okay, if I was giving advice back to my younger self, is you are enough. Remember that. I think that's important.
Mhm.
And then if I fast forward, um, what will my future self advice my future self would give me today? You think
Mhm.
what they would say? I think they would say, "We're really proud of you."
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
love, yeah,
Yeah.
that's beautiful. Yeah. And I just want to end with saying, Angie, I have loved just reconnecting with you over the last couple of years. And I've just loved, I know the world feels like people for the last 20 years because, Facebook and all that. But I remember being, this 20-year-old and being like, I want to be Angie Buckingham when I grow up. You were just so good at motivating and inspiring people, and you've obviously kept that through. And last night, when I was getting ready for this podcast, I was thinking about how, when I started at Vector, you had just met Warren. Then I watched you have a baby, and then suddenly you were having another baby. And then you've built this business, you've built this just like amazing family, this amazing life for yourself. And it's really incredible to witness because I think it gives me kind of a blueprint that this is the life that we are able to create for ourselves. So I really value knowing you and getting to reconnect again. And thank you for being my first podcast guest.
Well, thank you so much. When we did reconnect, I just when we first reconnected, I was like, oh, energy that Alex brings is infectious. That's what I remember. I was like, you are fun, you are authentic, you're sincere, and people feel better when they're around you. So I'm really, really glad that we've been able to reconnect. Yeah, very excited.
Well, thank you, Angie. And see you soon and see all of you who are listening in Austin, right? At the
Sounds
retreat.
good.
Gonna be good.
Fantastic. We would love
Okay.
it.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks. All right.
Okay, thank you for doing that.
That was great.